Tonight's NFL 360 on NFL Network at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Mark Kriegel sitting down with Antonio Brown. He is that size. I mean, I know he plays bigger, and he does. He truly is, in our day and age that we're talking about, Des Bryant, talking about Calvin Johnson, who's now retired, obviously. You talk about these big, tall dudes outside the numbers who run like deers. What he's doing is unbelievable, Mark.
He is, and I do a lot of boxing. Pound for pound.
Yes.
He is the best football player on the planet and has been for quite some time. He's 5'10". He was a $180 when he was drafted. I don't care what he says.
Yeah.
And the way he trains, he put some stuff up on Instagram or Twitter or whatever that stuff is. I don't even know how to use of new training stuff that he's doing after practice.
Yeah.
Like, Rich, I'm telling you right now, if you do this stuff, if you train, you spend 2 weeks with Antonio Brown, my bet is you get under 4.5. That's what I.
Now you're not talking height, right? You're talking about speed.
I'm talking your burst, baby. I'm talking burst. But we do have this notion, and Calvin Johnson articulated it most perfectly, that the prototype or the archetype for a receiver is supposed to look like the Silver Surfer comic book. You know, he's supposed to be like a perfect human specimen, 6'5", 240. And here comes this guy, 5'10". He is the best sixth-round pick since Tom Brady.
There's no doubt about that. I would agree with that.
And he is underpaid. He doesn't make a big deal out of it. I'm sure he wants to build his brand with that haircut.
The square hat, yeah.
Is in fact inimitable. And
business is booming.
Should be.
That's his saying, right?
His business is booming. And you know what, too? Do you remember when Mike Wallace was holding out?
Yeah.
And the Steelers said, well, we're going to pay Antonio Brown anyway. And everyone was just like, what are the Steelers doing? And, well, they were sly as a fox is what they were doing.
Patrick Peterson said the other day that Antonio Brown is the most difficult guy in the league to cover because of his speed, because of the way he puts his weight, makes it difficult to tackle. Also, like we used to say about basketball players before we had these horrible offenses, before the Warriors at least, he's always running, he's always moving, you always have to keep an eye on him. And what he did last year, without hesitation, I say he should have been the MVP of the league. If he weren't knocked out of that final game, you can make an argument. Would they lose by 7-8 points to Denver?
You look at that final score.
Burfict's cheap hit may have changed the course of football history. It's conceivable. I'm not saying it's likely, but it is in fact conceivable. Knocking him out of the game again, the playoff game against Denver, may have cost him because he was the MVP of the season. Our stat guys at the NFL Network came up with this spectacular number. If Roethlisberger hadn't missed, I think it's like 6 games. I remember Le'Veon Bell was out too. If he had that Antonio Brown would have wound up with in excess of 2,100 yards.
23-16 was the final. It was a 7-point game.
7-point game.
And that hit on Brown, and everyone was thinking, oh, he'll come back for that game. He'll come back. And even Burfict was even. You remember Adam Jones was saying that that he would basically eat his hat, that he was going to win a Grammy or something like that.
Which I think that
for his acting.
I didn't see a severe enough or heartfelt enough apology from Adam Jones for that, because this is a guy in Antonio Brown who was underestimated at every juncture of his career. A guy who was, I don't mean to make like a huge hero out of him, but he was homeless as a kid. He was a walk-on at Central Michigan. He was way too small to play in the pros. Then he was, listen, the best he can do is be a backup to Mike Wallace. And at each juncture, he has not just exceeded expectations, but completely shattered them. The other thing that's different about Antonio Brown, you hear it all the time, and I understand why. Guys need motivation. You see this with the interplay with Riley and LeBron. Who's motivating who and who said what to whom and all this stuff. Yeah. This guy never talks about the chip on his shoulder. And what he says to me in the piece is, I didn't have to prove anyone wrong. I knew what I was, and I know I'm going to work harder than the next guy. When there's a guy out there, a young guy who thinks he's better than I am, he'll be thinking that, and I'll be working. So there's something enormously endearing about this guy
So appealing.
who is not, not standing over you, doesn't have a chip on his shoulder, has none of the, you guys counted us out bit. He's just a nice dude, and he is as tough as there is, man. He's as tough as there is.
And that's tonight on NFL 360.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.